Hello folks, welcome to my YouTube channel Watercolor Impressions. Today we're going to learn how to paint an elephant in watercolors. I'm showing my drawing process. That's the first step in every painting. I'm also going to provide the drawing template for you guys so you guys can draw from the reference so that it will save you some time. And I highly recommend drawing from my drawing template than tracing it out, because it also trains your eye and it also helps you in other parts of your work as well. So whenever I draw, I make sure that I focus on the bigger shape first. I don't get bogged down on details. I focus on the bigger shape first. If I get the shape right first, then I can add the secondary details and tertiary details. As you can see in my drawing that I also going darker on certain areas, like for example for the eyes, or wherever the form changes. Let's jump on to the fun part. Let's paint the sky. I'm also making sure to keep it weak. I'm using purple or violet. You can use whatever you want, and you can also use a CobalBlue. And I'm also making sure that it's really weak. And I'm also taking some of my paint from my palette, and at the bottom I want to create a gradient. And as it comes to the midground, I'm using Cerulean Blue, Cadmium Yellow. And I'm also making sure that it's also weak too. But as it comes down to the foreground, I'm going a little bit darker so that it gives a good lead in to our focal point. Our focal point is an elephant, so I want to make sure that the foreground leads into our painting. I'm also throwing some water drops in the foreground to create a little of edges. There's a testa that's with Alizarin Crimson with a little bit of NeutralTint. I want to make sure the pigment is lighter, and I'm also throwing out yellow ochre in my painting as well. And I make sure that my paint bleeds through with other paint and it mixes by itself. That's a wonderful thing about watercolors. You don't have to blend it, it blends by itself, and it creates variety of edges and textures. I've seen a lot of watercolorists and everything looks flat because they use only 3 or 4 colors and they don't let that blend through. And I always make sure that it blends properly. But now I'm focusing on only 2 colors. So Alizarin Crimson, yellow ochre with NeutralTint. So the point of doing the first wash to kill the whiteness of the paper, and I also think about lighting. So whenever I see the reference, I think about I'm painting the light. Now if you see here, I'm using a little bit of cat orange here and there so that it kills the monotony of my colors. So it's not the same colors everywhere. And I also make sure that it blends with my other painting as well. And if you can see, it also looks patchy, but I also make sure that it blends through. So I'm taking a little bit of clean water. I'm trying to blend it with other colors as well. So once we finish the first wash, we're going to be going to the second wash soon. So for the tail, I want to make sure the front part which attaches the tail looks sharper and gets blurrier when it goes back, because it creates a sense of depth. I'm taking the clean water. Now I'm just taking away some paint from my light wash. So now we are jumping on to the midtones. So when it comes to midtone, I'm thinking about wherever the shadows, wherever the form meets. So for the midtones, I usually mix burnt amber, ultramarine blue, and NeutralTint. Or also you can use ultramarine blue, Alizarin Crimson, burnt amber. So either one works, but I make sure that my midtones reach properly. And it looks darker, but in watercolors, when it dries out, it gets lighter. So I was keep that in mind, and I go a little bit darker on my tones. But as soon as you can see, as soon as we introduce a little bit of darker values, the painting start coming together. So I'm going at the back part. So the back part, like the back part of the elephant usually sits on the shadows, so I make sure that I silhouette the shadows, and I'm making sure there was an eyelet in his belly, so I make sure leave some spots for it. So I'm jumping onto the tail. So as soon as I put the darker values, you can see the ears came in the front. And I also saw that in my reference that the forms of my head of my elephant is not reading properly, so I'm glazing over with burnt amber and a little bit of neutral tint, and I'm letting it blending through at the bottom as well. So as come to the eyes, it's the same thing. I also make sure whenever you paint, make sure the form reads properly. But as you can see, as soon as I put the midtones, my front part of an elephant is not reading properly. So I'm glazing over with violet with a little bit of neutral tint. As soon as I did that, you could see the front leg came in the front. Same thing for the ears too. So now I'm going a little bit darker from the mid value. So you can see I'm using more of French Ultramarine blue. I'm going super darker on it, and I make sure that it blends with my midtones as well. So it also creates a partial shadows. We're almost at the end of the painting. I'm also noticed that the forms are not reading properly on top of my top of his head, so I make sure that I glazed over burnt amber with a little bit of CobalBlue. And now I'm focusing on the trunk, the tusk. So I'm taking tissue paper and I'm dabbing and taking off colors from certain areas. This just to create a texture, and it also, when it dries out, it gives a lot of loose edges in my painting. And you can also see there's a spot at the back which is really tight on his belly, so I will fix it. So same thing with the trunk. The trunk was reading flat, so I'm going at the back of the tail now. So now I'll be focusing on the trunk because it looked flat, so I want to make sure that the forms are changing properly. So same thing, glazing over and taking tissue paper to remove the colors from it. So as soon as you can see, as soon as I introduce some of the values and making sure the form reads, it's almost there. So now I'm going at the top. The top, I didn't focus on it. So same thing, I'm using burnt amber, ultramarine blue, and I make sure that there's a sharp edge at the top and loose edges at the bottom so that the form reads properly. So now I'm jumping onto the eyes. So there's a sharper edge and there's a loose edge on the top. So that creates a gradient for his eyes, and there's a form change. So now I also noticed that in front of his face, the forms are not reading properly. So I'm going darker, and I also make sure there is a hard edge and the soft edge so that it creates a gradient. So now when I'm squinting my eyes, whenever I paint, I make sure to squint my eyes to see for darker values and lighter values. So when I squint my eyes, I came to know that there's a lot of darker values in his ears too. So I'm kind of like, whenever I see darker values, when I squint, I'm just throwing it wherever I see it, and I'll just blend it together. But as soon as I put the darker value on his legs, you can see it came even farther in the front. So that's what I want, because I want to create an illusion of depth from his front part to the back part. So I also want to bring his ears closer to the front ears too. So now I'm going darker on his front leg so that it reads as one shape. And I'm taking tissue paper to dab off certain areas. And it was bothering me, that odd edge, so I want to get rid of that odd edge. So I put some water in it, and I made sure that there is a hard edge and clean edge. So we are almost at the end of our painting, and I saw that I super focused on his legs, but I want to make sure that this painting is all about his face and his focal point. So I want to make sure that everything reads flat, or didn't have that much detail. It's usually whenever an object contacts the ground, it goes darker, so I want to make sure that I have a darker value where he stands. Now I'm putting the shadows. I want to create a shadow, a sharper and a blurry shadow. So you can see in the front it looks sharper. When it goes at the back, it goes blurrier. So that gives the illusion of depth. I did the same thing on the tail too, just to read properly. So I'm taking some white paint and I'm just squinting my eyes and looking at my reference and throwing white paint wherever I see it. And I also make sure to spray some water on it so that it blends with my other colors, so it gives a lot of really good textures on it. And I also noticed that the front part of the leg is not reading the form properly, so I'll be like glazing over. So wherever I'm seeing a lighter value, I'm just throwing it there and using tissue paper. So as I told you about the trunk was reading really flat, so I want to make sure that his trunk also reads properly as it goes down. So now I'm focusing on the front leg because it reads super flat as one shape, so I want to create a gradient. Now this step is to create and silhouetting our focal point. So this is just vignetting in a photograph. It's the same thing I'm doing it here. And that's it, guys. We're almost a friend of our journey. And I'm just throwing colors wherever I can see it and splattering some water. And I'm taking some white paint and bringing the tusk details back. And splattering some water, splattering some painting. That's it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed watching this tutorial, let me know what you learned today from this video and what's your favorite color in this painting and what techniques have you learned today and are we going to use it in your personal work. Let me know in the comments. And if you also follow this tutorial and did a painting of this elephant, share it with me. I'd love to check your artworks too. And thanks again for watching this video. Please like, subscribe and comment below. And good luck with your painting, folks.